So have you ever, like, sketched out a completely flawless, life-changing fitness routine in your head?
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone has.
Right. You know the exact mental space I'm talking about here. You sit down on a Sunday evening, you grab a fresh notebook, and you just map out this incredible multi-tiered vision of your new healthy lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, you're totally pumped.
Exactly. You've got the cardio blocks all color-coded, the weightlifting splits, the meal prep windows perfectly timed out, and then, you abandon the entire thing about 3 days later.
Like clockwork.
Yeah, because it required, well, more hours, more focus, and just more raw energy than actually exists in a normal human workday.
It is a profoundly universal experience, really. I mean, we build these towering monuments to our future selves, assuming we will somehow possess just infinite willpower.
Right. Infinite willpower that we definitely do not have.
Exactly. And then the friction of, like, a rainy Tuesday afternoon hits, right? A meeting runs late, you're tired, and the whole grand architectural design just completely collapses.
And that collapse is exactly what we are tackling today. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at some incredibly practical insights from Hampton, who is the creator behind the widely followed YouTube channel, Hybrid Calisthenics.
It's a fantastic channel.
It really is. And the mission for us today is to deconstruct this whole idea of the ideal fitness routine. Because that perfect schedule you keep designing, it's actually, secretly, the exact thing holding you back.
Which sounds counterintuitive at first.
It does. But we are going to break down why you do that to yourself. And then we'll replace it with a surprisingly simple, scientifically backed approach that actually fits into real life.
Yeah, and it requires a fundamental shift in how we view physical adaptation. Because Hampton's approach gets right to the core of why so many of us fail before we even really begin.
Yeah.
I mean, it is rarely a lack of discipline. It's really a fundamental misunderstanding of what human biology actually requires to change.
Right. And as we try to figure out how to fix this, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why we consistently fail at our fitness routines, we really first have to examine where these wild, over-the-top expectations come from in the first place.
We do.
And for Hampton, that expectation was set very early in his childhood, largely by his father.
Yes, his father was in the military with a background that strongly suggests special forces training. And naturally, as fathers do, he would tell his son these incredibly intense stories about the physical conditioning they had to endure.
And when we say intense, I mean, that word barely scratches the surface here. Hampton shares these visceral details from his dad's experiences, and one of them is just staggering to me.
The hiking one.
Yes. He talks about his dad going on this excruciating mandatory 3-day hike with his unit, and his dad was so deeply exhausted, so sleep-deprived, that his brain was actually shutting down while he was in motion.
Which is terrifying.
Totally. He would literally fall asleep in between steps. Like, he would drift into unconsciousness while his foot was in the air. And the sheer physical shock of his heavy boot hitting the ground would jar his nervous system awake just enough to lift his other leg and take the next step.
It's just an incredible image of pushing human physiology to its absolute outermost limits.
I can't even imagine.
Right, but you have to realize that in that scenario, their central nervous system is completely redlining. They were marching in a line under heavy load, and stopping just simply wasn't a geographical or professional option.
And that wasn't even an isolated incident. I mean, Hampton grew up hearing about them climbing massive ropes where a single slip meant a fatal fall.
Yeah.
He heard about drills where soldiers would have to roll down hills over and over again until the sheer vertigo and physical trauma caused them to violently vomit.
It's brutal.
It is. So if you're a kid and you're absorbing all this, you naturally internalize a very specific definition of effort. You think, all right, so this is what it looks like to train. If I want to be truly fit, this is the baseline of suffering that's required.
Which naturally bleeds into the modern ideal routine we all tend to construct for ourselves. I mean, you and I might not be training for elite military operations, but we still build these daily schedules that are heavily influenced by a media landscape that, frankly, glorifies suffering.
Absolutely. When you look at the fitness influencer space, or even just pop culture, we are basically trying to live out a Rocky montage every single day.
Yes. Or, as Hampton points out in his videos, we try to train like an anime character. I think he specifically mentions Naruto.
It does, yeah, Naruto.
Yeah.
And what does that media-driven fantasy actually look like for the average person listening? You tell yourself you're going to wake up at 5 a.m. sharp.
Of course.
You immediately hit the pavement for a crisp 5-mile jog.
Yeah.
You come back, you cool down with some grounding yoga, then you head to the gym to lift heavy weights for an hour.
And then you go to work.
Right. After all that, you somehow go work a highly productive 9-hour job. But wait, you're not done. After work, you hit the gym again for a second session, all while maintaining an absolutely flawless, perfectly measured diet.
Honestly, it is exhausting just to verbalize. And biologically, for a natural athlete without, a full team of nutritionists or performance-enhancing compounds, it's just a recipe for central nervous system burnout.
But wait, isn't aiming high a good thing? Because culturally, we are constantly conditioned to believe that. We're taught to shoot for the moon, right?
We are, yeah.
So isn't designing a grueling, hyper-intense routine just a foolproof way to guarantee we get results? Like, if you demand the absolute maximum from your body, logically, shouldn't you see maximum benefits?
Well, when you look at the physiological goals of the average person, what's fascinating here is the realization Hampton's dad eventually shared with him years later.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
Right. When Hampton was an adult, he finally asked his dad about the underlying logic of those extreme military stories. He basically pointed out to his father, "Dad, none of that was actually a healthy way to train."
Right. He called him out.
He did. He said, "You weren't resting, your muscles weren't recovering to build new tissue, and you were putting your joints through dangerous, unrecoverable stress." And you know what his dad said?
He agreed.
He completely agreed.
Which is wild. He openly admitted that the training wasn't about health or fitness at all.
Precisely. His dad explained that the military conditioning wasn't engineered for optimal physical health or joint longevity or muscular hypertrophy, which is just the technical term for muscle growth.
Yep.
It was engineered purely for trauma readiness. It was designed to build short-term psychological endurance so that these soldiers wouldn't mentally break down when they were fighting for their lives in hellish, traumatic conditions.
Which is a completely different biological objective than what you or I are trying to achieve on a Tuesday morning. When you think about your actual fitness goals, whether you are prepping for a local marathon, trying to keep up with your kids, or just wanting to look a little better in a t-shirt, you're usually looking to trigger muscle growth, increase your baseline strength, improve your joint mobility, or optimize fat loss.
Yes, and that is exactly where the disconnect is so profound. We have adopted these performative, media-driven routines that are built entirely on the aesthetics of struggle.
The aesthetics of struggle. I like that.
It's true, though. We falsely equate suffering with biological progress. We think that if we aren't totally depleted, like a soldier or a movie protagonist, well, then we aren't really triggering change in our bodies. But those grueling high-volume routines are entirely mismatched with actual biological health.
So if we know this conditioning is completely mismatched for our bodies, why are we still so obsessed with it? I think Hampton's channel perfectly explains the psychology behind our perfectionism here.
The psychological block.
Exactly, because trying to emulate elite soldiers or anime characters doesn't just make us physically tired. It actually creates this massive psychological block that stops us from doing anything at all. Hampton shares his own past attempts to reach this crazy ideal when he was younger. He literally tried doing 1,000 push-ups a day or 1,000 sit-ups a day.
He also mentions periods where he would run 5Ks every single day with absolutely zero rest days.
Zero rest days.
And the psychological reasoning he gives is incredibly telling. He didn't take rest days because the anime characters he watched on TV never showed taking a day off.
Wow.
He was literally optimizing his real life around fiction.
And physiologically, I mean, doing 1,000 push-ups every day is just asking for connective tissue damage.
Oh, without a doubt.
You aren't giving your body the 48 hours it usually needs to synthesize new protein. You're just tearing the muscle down continuously without letting it rebuild.
Right.
But beyond the biology, this inevitably leads to massive psychological burnout. And Hampton uses this brilliant architectural analogy to explain what's happening in our brains. He says we tend to treat our fitness journey like we are trying to construct a massive, luxurious mansion.
Right, rather than viewing it as highly effective, simple home improvement.
Exactly. We ignore the easy, highly beneficial projects like, building a nice deck on the back of the house or finally fixing a leaky sink because we are entirely obsessed with the mansion.
I want the grand estate.
Yeah. We think, well, if I don't have the time or the materials to build a sprawling estate with a home theater and an indoor pool, why should I even bother picking up a hammer?
Exactly.
And I want you, the listener, to really think about your own routine right now. Have you ever skipped a workout entirely just because you only had 20 free minutes before dinner and you felt like 20 minutes just wasn't enough time to do it perfectly?
Oh, I've been there.
Me too. You hold out for the perfect fitness mansion, and as a result, you end up living out in the cold.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, We can see how perfectionism transforms from a motivator into a literal barrier to entry. Our subconscious is incredibly tricky, and frankly, it just wants to conserve energy.
Right, the brain is lazy.
Very lazy.
Right.
It builds this insurmountable mountain out of our lofty goals. We want to be stronger, leaner, more energetic. Those are excellent goals.
Sure.
But then we attach those goals to an impossible, grueling daily requirement. We tell ourselves that the only valid path to being leaner is that 5 a.m., 2-hour, zero-rest day lifestyle.
Which gives us the perfect excuse to fail before we even start.
Exactly. Because we know deep down in our prefrontal cortex that we cannot sustain that lifestyle alongside our actual jobs and families, the ideal routine actually becomes the very reason we don't start.
Wow.
It's a self-protective mechanism for our ego.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. If the mountain is too high to climb, you never have to face the vulnerability of putting on your hiking boots and actually being bad at climbing. You just wave your hand, say, I don't have the time to do it right, and you let yourself off the hook completely.
It is such a quiet, insidious trap. But okay, if the mansion approach is a trap, we have to pivot. We have to look at the actual scientific reality of what the human body requires to get fit, rather than what influencer culture says we need.
Yes.
And Hampton drops a statistic in his videos that completely shatters the mansion illusion.
The contrast between perceived necessity and biological necessity is just stark.
Truly. Because according to the research he highlights, some people can achieve measurable muscle growth and strength gains with as little as one set a day.
One set.
One single set of an exercise. That takes, maybe 1 to 2 minutes of actual time under tension?
It sounds absurd when you have been culturally conditioned by the 2-hour gym bro montages, but it is entirely biologically accurate.
And it gets better for people wanting a slightly more robust routine. If you want a realistic, full-body protocol that you can follow week by week, Hampton points to studies on ideal muscle growth that show doing 3 sets to failure per muscle group can be completed in just 10 to 15 minutes a day.
10 to 15 minutes. That is the minimum effective dose. That is the biological requirement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but I have to ask.
Right.
Is this just another 6-minute abs gimmick?
I know, it sounds like it.
Right. Physiologically, how can a 10-minute workout possibly compete with the guys spending hours in the gym? How does that actually work inside the body?
This raises an important question, and we really have to differentiate between what triggers adaptation and what is just performative endurance.
Okay.
The crucial phrase you mentioned a moment ago is sets to failure. We should clarify what failure means here.
Yeah, let's define that.
It does not mean stopping when you are sweaty or when the muscle starts to burn or when you feel kind of tired. It means mechanical failure.
Okay, mechanical failure.
It is the precise point where you physically cannot complete another repetition of that exercise with proper form.
So if I'm doing a push-up, it's the point where I am stuck at the bottom and my arms literally refuse to push me back up no matter how hard I try.
Yes. And here is why that matters. Your body is highly efficient. When you do easy repetitions, your body only recruits low-threshold motor units. These are the slow-twitch muscle fibers that don't cost a lot of energy to use.
Right, just the basic everyday muscles.
Exactly. But when you push a muscle to true mechanical failure, you are forcing your central nervous system to recruit high-threshold motor units. These are the deep, stubborn, fast-twitch muscle fibers that only activate when the body thinks it is in an absolute emergency.
Okay, so reaching failure is like ringing the alarm bell.
Exactly. Think of the biological trigger for muscle growth like a thermostat in your house.
Okay.
Once the temperature drops to a certain point, the thermostat clicks and the heating system turns on. The signal is sent. Reaching mechanical failure is hitting that button. Once those high-threshold fibers are exhausted, your nervous system sends a chemical signal to synthesize new protein and build back stronger. And once that signal is sent, well, it's sent.
So doing more doesn't send more signals.
No. Doing 45 more minutes of lifting after that thermostat is clicked is just what exercise scientists call junk volume.
Junk volume. I love that term.
It's very descriptive.
Yeah.
I mean, it burns calories, sure, and it creates systemic fatigue that makes you feel like you worked hard, but it does not trigger any additional muscle growth.
Wow.
Your body doesn't wear a watch. It doesn't know if you've been in the gym for 10 minutes or 2 hours. It only knows whether or not those high-threshold motor units were forced to fail.
That actually completely shifts how you look at gym culture.
It really does.
If the biological reality is that 10 to 15 minutes of highly targeted effort is enough to pull the trigger, how do we actually implement that into a chaotic, busy life? Because even knowing this, life still gets in the way. And this is where Hampton introduces the concept of the hybrid approach, which is obviously the namesake of his entire platform, Hybrid Calisthenics.
And the philosophy behind that name is brilliant because it addresses the reality of the human autonomic nervous system. Your stress levels, your sleep quality, your nutrition, they all change daily.
Yeah, they really
A
do.
rigid system just breaks under that pressure.
Right. You aren't a machine. The 10 to 15-minute routine we just talked about, doing a few sets of squats, push-ups, or pull-ups of failure, that is your foundation. That is your non-negotiable baseline.
Yes.
So picture this. It's a Tuesday. You just worked a grueling 9-hour shift. Your boss yelled at you. You're exhausted, and you just want to sink into the couch.
We've all been there.
Right. Instead of feeling massive guilt that you can't do your planned hour-long workout, you just do your 10 intense minutes. You hit mechanical failure on a few exercises, you pull that biological trigger, and you are done.
You built the deck.
You built the deck. Guilt-free.
But the hybrid approach isn't just about doing the minimum, it's about scaling intelligently. What about a Saturday when you slept for 8 hours, the sun is shining, and you have abundant energy?
That is when you hybridize. On high-energy days, you scale up. You take that 10-minute foundational routine and you start adding things you actually enjoy doing, rather than things you feel obligated to do.
Exactly.
You can add a 30-minute jog, you could jump rope, do some deep mobility stretching. Hampton mentions adding martial arts, training, wrestling, or just going out and playing soccer with your friends. You scale your physical activity from 10 minutes up to an hour or more, depending entirely on what your central nervous system is capable of on that specific day.
It shifts fitness from being this rigid, punitive obligation to a daily exploration of what your body is capable of.
I love that framing.
And it's worth noting that Hampton provides this highly adaptable foundational routine completely openly to his audience.
Yeah, he makes a great joke about it in one of his videos. He says he sat down and decided he was going to charge $1 million a year for access to this perfect routine.
A bargain.
Right. But luckily for everyone, he's running a special where it is currently 100% off.
Nice.
It has been 100% off since the beginning, and it will be free forever. You can literally just go to his website and look at it right now.
The humor highlights a very serious point regarding the fitness industry, though. The barriers to entry, the high monthly costs, the massive time commitments, the complex periodization charts. They're largely illusions we've bought into because they are profitable for the industry.
It makes you look at the fitness influencer space in a totally new light.
It does.
When you're scrolling online and you see one of those influencers with the perfect lighting, the massive vascularity who practically lives at the gym, you realize you don't need to feel inadequate.
No, not at all.
You don't have to look at them and think, man, I wish I could be healthy, but I don't have 2 hours a day to dedicate to this. You can look at them and realize that the foundation of their physique, the actual muscle growth, was built in the exact same 10 to 15 minutes of intense mechanical failure that you have access to in your own living room.
Exactly. When you look at those routines, you have to remember the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, or in this case, the 90-10 rule.
Okay, yeah.
That fitness influencer is spending an extra hour and a half in the gym every single day to reap the final 10% of physical benefits.
Yeah.
That extreme optimization is their literal job. Or perhaps they are utilizing performance-enhancing protocols that require different volume management. But you, as an everyday person, do not need to chase that final 10% to completely transform your baseline health, your mobility, and your longevity.
You can just claim the first 90% of the benefits in 10 minutes. It completely validates the idea that the ideal routine cannot be copied and pasted from an elite athlete. It must be uniquely yours. Because our daily energy, our work stress, our family obligations, they fluctuate wildly. The true power of the hybrid approach is its unapologetic adaptability.
It respects the reality of the individual. As we noted earlier, a rigid system shatters when the unpredictability of life applies pressure. An adaptable system, a hybrid system, bends, absorbs the chaos of a normal human life, and survives.
So what does this all mean? For you listening right now, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the extreme, vomit-inducing military conditioning of Hampton's dad.
Strong image.
Yeah. And we realized that you do not need to train your central nervous system for a survival scenario just to drop a few pounds or build some muscle.
Right.
You don't need to be an anime protagonist who refuses to take a rest day, and you certainly don't need infinite time or flawless motivation.
You don't need to build the mansion.
You just need to build the deck. And building that fitness deck takes a fraction of the time you thought it did. Fitness can start today. right now. With just a single set of squats in your living room to mechanical failure or a brisk, intentional walk around your neighborhood.
That's it.
That is literally all it takes to lay the foundation and pull the biological trigger. And if you trust that process and you just show up for those 10 to 15 minutes, imagine looking back 3 years from now. That quiet, boring 10-minute consistency is going to compound into physical progress you previously thought was completely impossible for someone with your schedule.
It is a profound shift of how we view the relationship between effort and reward. We've explored how media conditioning and cultural expectations trick us into overcomplicating our routines, demanding perfection just to chase that final fraction of a percent of optimization.
Yeah.
But it leaves you with a much broader question to consider. We've seen how we do this with fitness, but what other areas of your life, whether it's your career trajectory, a creative hobby you've been putting off, or learning a complex new skill, are you entirely failing to start because you are paralyzed waiting for the mansion, instead of simply picking up the hammer and building the deck?
Oof. That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where else are we using perfectionism as a shield? Stop waiting for the perfect 2-hour window to open up in your calendar. Stop sketching out the flawless routine. Just grab a hammer and start building the deck today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that 10 minutes for yourself today, and we will see you next time.